Welcome to the latest edition of Keep Calm Crisis Talks from Clarity Global. Today we are talking to Laetitia Gruwel, who's got extensive experience in communications and crisis communications. And we're going to talk about an event that happened towards the end of last year, which is a scary example in many ways of how social media at a time of a very kind of politically charged time can lead to a crisis of both local and international scale. And it was a Europa League game at the end of last year between the football game between Ajax from Amsterdam and Maccabi Tel Aviv that led to some significant riots, racist attacks, etc. So this is what we're going to talk about today, and what can perhaps be done to prevent further kind of crises to escalate if they happen again. Letitia, thank you so much for joining us today. It's glad to have you here. So talk to us a little bit about what happened on this day.
Yeah, well, it was November last year. Then there were about 2,500 supporters of Maccabi Tel Aviv. They came to Amsterdam for the football league against Ajax. And after that match, things went wrong. Groups of young men, often on scooters and in taxis, they harassed the Maccabi fans on the streets. That's what came out. Mm-hmm. Some were assaulted, others were chased, and sometimes even forced to shout certain slogans. So really nasty things. Mm-hmm. And this was all filmed and shared on social media. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, the municipality, they spoke of a minor rioting. But then things escalated, and international media and Israeli politicians in particular, they immediately spoke of a pogrom and a Jew hunt. Well, that set a different tone and caused a global attention for this issue and for this terrible happening. And the mayor of Amsterdam and the police and central government, they suddenly had no longer locally any control because it went all international. So what happened and what were the facts? And they so many things went wrong, especially in the preparation.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned the preparation element, because of course this is the rule number one in crisis comms. It's how do you best prepare. So what went wrong in the preparation, or what was missing? What did they where did they fail?
Well, it went wrong a lot of things in the preparation went wrong. The essence lies in underestimating the situation. There's a war going on between Israel and Hamas, and that was at that time also full swing. And in Amsterdam, that led to tension between Jewish and Muslim communities. Pro-Palestine student demonstrations were also being held. But the triangle, the mayor, the police, the public prosecution office, they were still, according to the principle, only act if there are concrete signs. And there were no concrete signs prior to this all. There was no idea. This was a sudden escalation that happened immediately after the football match.
So I mean, this sounds like there was a bit of a kind of a maybe naivety or underestimating, as you say, the kind of should they have thought more about kind of what is the worst case scenario that can happen, and even if we don't have these concrete signs, but actually thinking maybe bigger to be better prepared.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the sentiment, especially in this kind of cases. Well, there were thousands of Israelis in Amsterdam, and they were in a tense context, especially the pro-Palestine protests, but also the Muslim community in Amsterdam. And they should have thought that through different scenarios. So what they thought was that Maccabi fans and Ajax fans would not go rioting against each other. And that didn't happen actually, but something else happened, and that was something they did not think about. The provocations and yeah, the quick escalation by social media.
Yeah, and I mean, we all know that a lot of crisis nowadays happens or starts on social media, and even if it doesn't start on social media, once it reaches social media, it spreads very quickly, and it's very difficult to get out of control. Talk a little bit about the role that social media played in this, because I remember there were some very kind of inflammatory messages, there were some very kind of shocking images, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. The social media and especially chat groups. But what happened was that there were images of violence and assaults. They were spread at lightning speed. I mean, it was so quickly, and in some cases there were even calls for violence through closed app groups. You know, the chat groups. Yeah, they actually called for violence. But the municipality and the police ran after that. They also missed the acts of the Maccabi hooligans who provoked people and started to destruct and pull the Palestine flag down. But this only came out a day later. That was very strange. So they didn't react properly at that time.
And can you give an example of the type of messages that came out during that time?
Yeah, it's horrible. They literally posted "tackle Zionists everywhere you see them," and these messages, they were shared en masse. So all these young boys and taxi drivers, they just were looking for Maccabi fans. And the police were in some of those groups, but the information was not getting to the right people fast enough. So and there was also that a lot of messages they couldn't verify who actually was the sender of it. And also, as said, they missed the actions of the Maccabi fans, the hooligans. One day later, after the incidents happened, an innocent neighbor just filmed a violent act of the Maccabi fans, and she put it on social media and asked why is this not mentioned? So that puts things in a complete different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at the time people were looking at this event, and again, we have to remind ourselves that this was at a very, very charged time with the conflict in Gaza, etc. And people were kind of wondering, will this happen in other countries? When they saw how this could easily get out of control. And what do you think that from, again, kind of a social media perspective, you're coming back to the point about, how can you best prepare for something like this, and from a monitoring perspective, etc.
Yeah, monitoring is very, very important, but this also starts with preparation. So you have to realize that social media is just as important as a physical surveillance. I mean, you have to monitor it even when it's peacetime. Let's say when you're not in a crisis, you have to know who your stakeholders are. So you have to set up a good team in advance to monitor online sentiment. Even in closed circles like Telegram or Discord, you need to know how, especially when you're acting in a tense situation or likely to be tense, and so you need to know who your online stakeholders are and what kind of influence do they have. Are they positive? Are they negative? Do they have a lot of followers? How do people react on it? And then during a crisis, you have to make sure that you have this surrounding sentiment available and that you can act on it quickly. So you have to incorporate that into your decision making
mm,
very quickly. So don't ignore it. And again, it's very important in preparation to look at risk-driven action than instead of only information-driven. So pay attention to implicit signals and look at the whole sentiment you're acting in.
I mean, we talked a little bit about government, but of course, another big, very important part was the role of the police. How did they tackle this? I mean, because it's obviously a very, very charged situation. How did they tackle this?
Yeah, of course, they were also involved in all the preparations, but and they were really present in large numbers. But their deployment focused on classic scenarios like the hooligan against the hooligans. But there were, I mean, it was not a hooligans against hooligans. It was just loose groups of people against Maccabi fans. Uh, not only the hooligans were attacked, it was all kinds of fans, people with children and everybody. So it was quite different, and they were not prepared for that.
Was
And
there a sense that the police was losing control of the situation?
yeah, they didn't know where to go. It was like everywhere in the city something happened. So they did not respond. Yeah, in they were with large groups, and there were small groups acting.
It's of course it's a very charged situation. The other part of this is the role of language, of course, which is a key kind of element on social media. You know, this kind of inflammatory language that we mentioned before. Let's talk a little bit more about the impact of language in this situation and
Yeah,
how
yeah.
that kind of fueled the crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, words matter not only on social media. You have to be very careful in any crisis. If you, the mainstream media, normal statements, words matter. And think about what kind of language you use anyway. In this case, terms like pogrom and Jew hunt, they are of course extremely loaded. I mean, especially in a city like Amsterdam, where in the after the World War II, more than 75,000 Jews didn't come back. So it's really, really tense to use these words. So especially when you don't have the facts established, and the facts were that they focused only on what the taxi drivers and the scooter boys did, but actually what the Maccabi fans did, that was not taken into account at the time that they had a press release. For instance, the mayor of Amsterdam, she repeated the word pogrom in her press conference. And that was a word that initially was brought into the scene by Israel.
Now that we have the kind of we know how the situation unfolded, we saw what the challenges it involved for everyone involved. We saw the failings of it. What would have been do you think, like what do you think that they've learned from this? Like, what would have been a better alternative in kind of communicating in this type of situation?
Yeah, first of all, be clear in your messaging. Keep room for nuance. I mean, they really made a firm statement. So tell what you know and tell what you're still investigating. And yeah, of course they did that, but it was still too firmly, towards the situation they knew. So communicate things that you know for sure, name the violence, show empathy, but also be careful with labels. And of course, I always use the 5 C's. Care, commitment, consistency, coherence, and clarity. And care is in this case, but in most cases in a crisis where people are involved, it's very important to show empathy. Show that you understand that the people are scared, angry, disappointed, whatever, but address that. That's rule number one. I mean, very important. Then show commitment, show what you're doing and what you're working towards to. I mean, we are looking into the situation, but and we try to solve it as quickly as possible. Be careful with timings, but yeah, show that commitment. And it's not only wording, but also showing. Then consistency. Well, stick to the message. Don't use any kinds other kinds of messages along the way. Stick to the main message. And be coherent. Make sure that your story is okay and right, and that all the parties that are involved are on the same page, so that there's no inconsistency regarding that. And last but not least is clarity. Is use clear language. In Holland we call it Jip and Janneke, and that is that it's for small children. Everybody should understand what you're saying. Don't use jargon or don't use any vagueness.
Do you think? I mean, this is really interesting, Letitia, because it's obviously directly related to a very probably not unique situation, unfortunately, because we have seen similar events, and you know, we might, hopefully not, but we might see them again. But what would you, as a communications and crisis expert professional, what would you can I say that the key lessons learned from this event is to anyone else who maybe represent an organization who could be drawn into some of these type of scenarios that we saw unfolded at the end of
Yeah.
last year?
Yeah. Well, there are several lessons, and the first one is yeah, preparation. Prepare scenarios and also language strategies, especially for sensitive topics such as ethnicity, religion, or international conflicts. Prepare yourself based on risk and not only on just information. What could happen, and not only like, oh, that will not happen. In this world, everything is possible. So I mean, yeah, just look at the risks also. Then, in preparation, monitor online. Monitoring is very, yeah, is necessary. Online framing, and respond in time with your own story on this kind of framing, which could be wrong or could be misunderstood or fake news, as they call it. So pay attention to the sentiment, and it's not only about factual information. Coordinate with stakeholders early on. So prior, in when it's not wartime, and then find out who your stakeholders are, and create ambassadors because they can help you during a crisis. And give yourself a buffer. So if if you are hit, then it doesn't do that much pain because you have these ambassadors around you. Communicate, even if you don't know what's actually going on, but process communication is also communication. So say what you're investigating and also give people perspectives for action. So what could they do? It's and communicate as neutrally as possible. And then respond not only factually, I already mentioned that, but also emotionally. In a crisis, people are scared, angry, sad, disappointed, whatever. But take that seriously in your tone. And I have an example for you. What recently happened in the Netherlands is there was a rumor around a well-known Dutch bicycle factory. It's called Babu, and that they had floor cargo bikes. You know, these bikes where you put children into.
Yeah.
And the rumor was that the frame of the bike could break. And that's a nightmare for all parents who transport their children in these kind of bikes. And they didn't dare to bring their children to school. But the rumor was actually true. And they had to recall some types of their bikes. And they didn't communicate at all. So they didn't listen. They didn't imagine what these parents felt about transporting their children on a bike, which maybe flaw. So yeah, the lesson is communicate and imagine your stakeholders' state of mind. Uh, so don't ignore that. Don't ignore it. It's very important.
What was the sentiment amongst the kind of the I guess the public the public in the Netherlands after this, once it finally kind of calmed down? Were people how do people react to this in terms of were they surprised of how it went? Were they shocked? Were they yeah? What was the general sentiment after
Yeah,
this?
first, of course, they were shocked, and I mean, how could this happen? But then new information arrived, like the Maccabi fans, the Maccabi hooligans. They actually also started it. It was not only that groups of Muslims or that they started it. It was an interaction, and that was misinterpreted from the beginning on, and that's where the sentiment changed. Like, but towards the government and the mayor. Uh, Hello, how could this been so gone so badly wrong?
How do you think? Because the way that the world is at the moment, with unfortunately, very conflict ridden. We've seen more activism than ever before. It's a very very charged situation around the world. It's a polarized political climate. So if we look at the kind of the role of social media influencers and kind of online activists from a broader perspective, not just what happened in Amsterdam, but how do you think authorities can engage, productively and positively with groups to perhaps avoid these kind of situations, to engage in a dialogue before these kind of things happen?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is all in the preparation. As I said, you need to know who the stakeholders are. You need to know the influences within these stakeholders, not only online, but also in the mainstream world. And you have to create ambassadors. You have to align with them in kinds of crisis, and maybe they can you can use them. They can balance the situation from their inside out. So that is a very important lesson, is know who your stakeholders are and know how they normally communicate. Yeah,
And
you can.
what do you do in this situation? Because obviously, every good crisis management team at least will do an evaluation of once the crisis has settled. You look back and you look at what worked well, what didn't work, what kind of changes do you have to make. What would be your advice to restoring some of these relationships that maybe have been very damaged or jeopardized?
Yeah. Well, I've been with organizations when the crisis is over, at least the big fuss in the outside world, then they think, oh my God, it's over, and let's do business as usual. But no, yes, business as usual, but also you need to restore proactively. So what went wrong? Evaluate, and these there are three things very important. That is acknowledgement, and listen and engage to the people who were involved, and give a consistent follow up. So acknowledgement is, so be honest what went wrong when things went wrong, and show real empathy. I mean, the mayor of Amsterdam acknowledged that she shouldn't have used the word pogrom. So that was a huge, it was, everybody thought it was too late because it already happened. But the fact that she actually acknowledges is okay. That's, she should have done that. And she did actually. So, and the second part is, engage actively with the communities who were involved and listen to what they have to say and put that in your scenarios for later on. So even their feedback, you can put it into policies or actions. And that is a part of the consistent follow-up. So demonstrate a long-term and consistent learning and show concrete improvements regarding, for instance, procedures or processes.
Do you think it's hard? Well, I guess it is hard, but the question is, I guess, how hard is it for an organization to re-engage with audiences that they might have upset the first time around, because either they ignore them or they didn't communicate with them the right way? Is it difficult to then come back to everyone and say, "Oh, sorry, we got it wrong. Let's start again"?
It's depending on. I mean, it's hard, but it's depending on how you want to restore it. If you really want to restore it, yes, it could be hard, but you need to do it, and then the reward will come because everybody will think, okay, they are really trying to fix this. So, but you have to be sincere.
We've mentioned a few times the importance of scenario planning and to your point, the kind of this risk-driven preparation. Can you give an example from your own career of where this has played a big role in terms of successfully prevented or minimized the impact of a crisis?
Well, I know a scenario. I was not really involved, but I know that there was a scenario in the Netherlands in 2022, 2023. These years just after COVID. There were lots of farmers' protests with tractors, because of huge discontent around the nitrogen measures. And the authorities knew, there will be big demonstrations, but where are they? And they are on the street with all these tractors, and there could be dangerous thing on highways and slowing down. And so they worked out several scenarios, such as peaceful demonstrations, blockades of motorways, but also confrontations at government buildings because they were really, really angry. And they were very flexible. And so they made a roadmap, for instance, for moving tractors to safe locations before they ended up in inner cities like The Hague. So they really, and of course, there were still some people, going out, and they had to fix that. But there were communication protocols prepared for social media. So that was a rather good preparation regarding the channels and the tone of voice also.
Very interesting. Last question, Letitia. We have on the podcast. We always like to look to the future. What's ahead of us? The road ahead that organizations are going to travel on, and I think it'd be a slight kind of underestimating the situation ahead would not be good. We have a lot of challenges around us. We have the continuation of global conflict. We have tariffs that are unprecedented. We have continuation of environmental catastrophes. Cyber attacks. So it's a challenging world to say the least. What do you think will be the biggest challenge for organizations going forward? We're 6 months into 2025, and where do you see organizations in terms of managing their reputation, dealing with this raft of challenges? Where do you think that the biggest priorities will lie?
The problem is that almost everything can become political. That is a real sort of danger, because the polarization in especially the political world is present, and it's what you said, unprecedented. So yeah, dealing with this super sensitive, unpredictable world is, yeah, that is the major challenge, uh, especially that you don't know where it's going. And that says it all. So if you don't know, yeah, try to think of what could happen. So risk-based preparation instead of information, only information. I mean, information is still, of course, very important, but yeah, it is unknown where we are going to be, and especially at the speed that the sentiments can shift globally, especially fueled by social media, is also unprecedented. So scenario planning is becoming more and more important, and especially companies who are dependent on international markets, logistics, technology, or commodities, they must ask themselves, what if, for instance, the trade war escalates? What if sanctions or boycotts hit my supply chain? What if customers pressure us to take a position? Because that's becoming more and more relevant. Um, and of course, you have a choice. And the key is not only to plan when things go wrong, but just think about the alternatives in communication, especially in communication strategies on forehand. So, especially regarding communication, it's important to think, what would we say, or what we would not say, especially in sensitive situations. So work out multiple communication scenarios, from staying neutral to taking a clear position, and depending on how the situation develops. So in short, is reputation management is no longer a matter of reactive crisis management. You have to be proactive and be prepared for all kinds of scenarios.
Wonderful, Letitia. Thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been a fascinating discussion around a case that illustrates so many complexities of the world that organizations operate in, and really, really interesting to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, and thank you to all the listeners who stayed to listen. Thank you.